Hello everyone, I'm Santiago, and today I'm gonna be testing Vampyr on the GeForce GTX 1060 3GB. For performance monitoring, I'll be using Chem. If you want to download the software, there's a link down in the description. So Vampyr, I'll be doing 1080p, 1440p and 4K. To skip turn out those sections of the video, check the description below. So at first, I'll show you the G4560 on 1080p using almost the maximum settings. The only thing that I lowered was TXAA on 4x instead of 6x. And also textures, which are on high instead of ultra. Some parts of the game use more than 3 gigs of VRAM on ultra textures, but yeah, other than those two options, the rest is just maxed out. And you'll notice a clear difference between the G4560 and the i3-8100. The Pentium just drops below 60 frames per second way more often, especially when going through different places of the map. I'll talk more about that later in the video. Then I switched to the i3-8100 and I show you the same configuration as the first part, which means it will be more stable due to the CPU. Then for 1440p, I show you a 50 to 60 FPS configuration, then I just crank it up to the max to see what frame rate we get. And finally at 4K, I try to stay over 30 frames per second because even at lowest settings, I'm unable to get anywhere close 60 frames per second. Even if I overclock the GTX 1060, that wouldn't help too much at all. The performance is still very similar. So I decided to not overclock the GPU this time around because it's enough to get 30 FPS on tweaked settings at 4K. And now I'm going to talk to you about the options menu and my experience testing this game. This game was made using Unreal Engine 4, so you have the usual options in the options menu plus some extra stuff. Honestly, TXAA wasn't as big of a hit as I expected, so if you have some GPU power to spare, I recommend you use it. It might make the game look a little bit blurrier, but it hides the aliasing quite well compared to FXAA. Then if you want the easiest boost in performance, just lower effects quality from ultra to medium. That usually gives you the best performance boost of all of the options. And if you want a little more frames there, just lower post-process to high, view distance to high and shadows to medium. Other than that, there's not much else that you can do to improve the frame rate significantly, so those are the options that I recommend lowering in the first place. That's it about the options menu. There is not much to discuss because between the highest and the lowest settings there is not a huge performance difference, and the visual difference isn't huge either. And well, about the performance, the game seems to be running quite well, but I found some things to talk about. First of all, it's capped at 62 frames per second. You can unlock the frame rate by just following the instructions down in the description, but I understand why the developers put that 62 FPS cap. It's for the game to feel more stable overall. But some things that I have to mention are that in the open areas of the game, there are not a ton of them. For example, in the hospital area that I'm just benchmarking, when you go outside of the hospital and look into the hospital itself, where all the detail is present, that's where I see the frame rate suffer, even on higher end hardware. Drops into the mid 40s, sometimes lower 50s. So it seems to be a thing with the game on how it loads different stuff. And there are also some sudden drops in the frame rate when you're just traveling through the map, especially the hospital. It just seems to be the game loading assets. So if you have something worse than an i3-8100 or Ryzen 3 1200, you can usually expect a little more stutter than shown in the video. And on some of my videos I tested the G4560, and on that one I noticed some extra stutter. As I was saying, it wasn't unplayable by any means, but sometimes while fighting you can get some stutters when you're being attacked. It's kinda random, but it can happen with 2 core 4 thread CPUs. So yeah, I expect this game to run pretty well. So I recommend leaving the frame rate cap in place unless you have something better than an i3-8100. So just expect some fluctuations in the frame rate, especially in the bigger maps in the game, just very specific parts of the game. Other than that, is very smooth, so there's not much of a problem with just combat. Performance there is quite nice. But yeah guys, that's pretty much it. I hope you keep enjoying the video. Thanks for watching and see you next time.
Take its head! Die, vermin! This one's mine! You'll pay for this! That leads oh my! Fuck! Filthy fucking beast!
This dead flesh needs it.
Oh, please spare me.
Closed. It's in here! Fuck! He's dead! Kill you! Take its head! Take a kill it! Die, vermin! Bloody monster! It's a killer! Don't like that, do ya? You're mine, vermin! I hate leeching! I'll send you to hell!
There's more and more of these bloody leeches every night.
A leech! A leech!